Welcome to Read Between the Lines book podcast. I am your host, Molly Southgate, and today I'm interviewing
Perttu Pölönen.
Hi there, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. It's a chilly September evening over here in Finland. I'm doing fine.
Nice. Yeah, it's been so amazing now that it's starting to turn a little bit more into fall.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So can you tell me about what you've written?
So I've written a book called Future Skills that goes through the most important skills I believe in. So what kind of competencies we should develop in the future. And it's a very kind of humane approach. So I talk a lot about, empathy, compassion, creativity, perseverance, and these types of skills that I think are going to counterbalance the technological advancement we're seeing already. So yeah, very kind of human approach to the skills we need in the future.
Yes. And something that I really love about this book is that it's about what skills we'll need in the future. And you touch on things like AI and stuff like that, but it's always rooted back to talking about people and talking about the things that make us human. I adore that part.
Well, thank you. I think that's kind of the perspective I also want to bring, because there's a lot of talk, a lot of, words, books about how the world is going to change and what is, ahead of us. Mm-hmm. But I think at the end of the day, the most important question is, how is it going to affect us humans? So what kind of things are we going to value in the future, and what will be important for us? And even though, yes, everything is changing, what are the things that don't change, actually? What are the things we can rely on and we can build on? And I think it's a journey kind of to your inner self, what is so important for us humans that it's never going to go away. So that was kind of my starting point.
I love that. Can you actually, speaking of that, can you tell me a little bit more about how you got inspired to write this book?
Yeah, well, I was fortunate to go to this course in Silicon Valley a couple of years ago where we studied the future. So we went through the global grand challenges and the technologies and, how the world will change. After that, I got a chance to go to Myanmar, where I was working in a project. And after seeing two very different kind of bubbles, if you will, Silicon Valley and then a developing nation, I came back to Finland and I started to think, well, I've learned something, I want to share something. And it kind of made me think, well, I think all of this technological progress that we see is super interesting and super cool. It's very important to know that. But I still think that, humans, we should not forget humans from the equation. So I started to think, well, if they sent me to a school, what would I want them to teach me? So what are the things that I think would be crucial for us to survive this unknown, uncertain future? And I thought, well, maybe I could put together a curriculum. So I actually took 12 skills and thought, well, this is what I think is relevant. And I wanted to examine why will they become more important. So it's not only how do you develop these skills and why they're important, but why they will become more important in the future. So that was kind of my starting point. I felt the urge to kind of show the other side of the coin as well when we talk about the future, the human side.
I love that so much. And I'm homeschooled. And a lot of the things that you talk about in the book have kind of been a part of my education. So it was interesting reading it from that perspective, knowing, well, I was taught from a young age how to communicate and how to have this empathy for people. It was really cool to read it and go, oh, I know that. And
yeah. And, me coming from Finland, many people know that Finland's education system is quite good. It's well known around the world. So it was also kind of that angle. I want to kind of reflect what was good about the way I was brought up in Finland, but also what I would change, and also the way we educate the young people right now. Are we doing it right or not? So I kind of wanted to throw that question in as well.
Yeah, I really like that. And I've had a lot of friends in school, and I think that this type of education would really help them, to be able to have it be more compassion focused and not the way that it is now, which is not, as you said, it's not right.
I once asked a futurist in Silicon Valley, what would you go to study if you were 20 something right now. And I was expecting an answer like, well, blockchain or quantum computers or, synthetic biology, something trendy, something hot, something like this. But he actually said that, well, if you want to, really look forward and do something, important for yourself in this way, go to study fine arts or philosophy, because the character, the thinking skills that you can acquire right now, those will help you throughout your whole life. Instead, if you go and study, let's say, coding, which is important, yes, we need coders, and there should be more maybe, but it will come and go. So maybe a couple of decades and machines will write their own code. So we won't have them like this forever. Or if you want to study Mandarin Chinese, of course, it would be very useful for you right now, because there are so many people who talk or speak the language. But maybe in a couple of years, we can simultaneously translate languages to our earpods right away. So the skill doesn't help you the same way you might think right now. So I think that was a very good answer, because even a futurist was like really ahead, thinks that, well, philosophy and fine arts is actually, the best kind of gift you can give yourself. Like, I think that was a wonderful answer.
Yeah, I love one of my favorite sections in the book is when you talk about creativity and say about how everyone is inherently creative. Because I cannot tell you the amount of people I know that are very creative that have told me they are not creative. Right. And it's an really interesting phenomenon. And I love that you touch on that and say it's okay to want to only pursue specifically coding, but also learn how to be an artist and also learn how to have these things. I love that so much.
That's kind of the added value you bring. Mm-hmm. I think, the people who can put things together, see problems from different angles, they have better chances to actually solving the problems. Mm-hmm. So I think, for example, what creativity is for me, and I have a background as a composer, so I went to study art, my kind of first love when I was a young kid. So I have been in touch with my creativity in that sense. But anyway, what creativity is for me, it's quite simple at the end of the day. It's just the ability to make choices. Because if you think of, a situation where you have to be creative, let's say I tell you, hey, you should design a chair. Then somebody might be like, well, I'm not creative, I don't know what it should be like. And I'm like, come on, it's a chair. Like, what could it possibly be? Like, it can have 3 legs or 4 legs or 1 leg. It can be blue, red, green. It can be made out of wood or steel or concrete, whatever. It's not difficult to come up with choice, like different options, different ideas. I think that's easy, but we sometimes confuse it with creativity. Creativity is maybe the ability to take the kind of potential options and then put those together and then come up with some new chair, for example. So I think we have to maybe approach creativity as just a skill to make choices, find the potential ones from an infinite amount of options.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So how did writing this book, if at all, affect your outlook on the future and on technology?
So how didn't hear the first part. How
did writing this book affect your outlook on the future of technology, if it did at all?
Yeah, well, it did. I mean, obviously, when you go deeper in these thoughts and themes, you see that everything is obviously not that as black and white as you might think. But I think it gave me this sense that even though we talk about soft skills every now and then, they don't really matter. They're like something that you do if you have time for those. Really spending time around those skills kind of made me realize that they are the core, they are the most important things we should start with when we educate the future coders, future leaders, future researchers. Because it makes you humble if you think of it. The way we educate the next generation of lawyers and coders and professionals, it defines the civilization we have soon. So it's no big deal, right? So I kind of realized that maybe it has only been a kind of challenge to verbalize why, or argument why these skills matter so much. One way I approach it in the book as well, I talk about, the like what will happen if we don't focus on these skills. Like we are very good at measuring activity or change in general, like what happened between this and this point, but we cannot measure or come up with an answer how expensive was it when we didn't do certain things. Like how valuable would have it been if we had seen it, in time. So I think this is one way to look at it. If we don't really give the right amount of attention to these skills, what kind of world will it then be? Like, do we want to have that kind of society where everything is very quick and fast and technological and very kind of, well, where people don't believe in the soft, invisible things that still matter in life?
Yeah. And I love that you're using the word like soft skills, because to me, that has the connotation like, oh my gosh, I want to learn those. Like it's soft and it's gentle and like it sounds important. But I know to a lot of people, if they hear that, it'll be like, oh, it's soft. I don't want to go near it.
Yeah.
And I love that you're saying like these are important. Like you want to learn the softer skills. I love that wording, especially.
I think that in many cases we already value speed over depth, which is a pity, because if you think of it, yes, we want to have concrete results. We want speed. We want to have kind of progress and fast. But sometimes we lack depth, experience, the right direction. And I think at some point it's a leadership challenge, or it's a challenge for our educators to stop for a moment to think, well, do we need to just get things done quickly and hurry with all these things, or should we just give more time and let the children be bored from time to time, or have them just play without a certain goal in mind? And so I think we should make the world a better place, not just more effective. And they aren't always the same. We can already make our banks and our shops and our libraries very effective and make robots run them. It would be very easily possible already. But will those become better that way? I wouldn't say so. Like, we want to have somebody to look at us in the eye when we go to the shop or the library. So even though something might be cheaper and more effective and kind of digitalized, we still have to ask, well, does it become better? Like, do we lose something in this transition when we just take the humans out of the equation?
Yeah.
So I think we have to kind of start to see that, we need to make the world a better place, and not only look at the numbers or the degrees or the grades that we get from the system. So yeah, I think it's a challenge for all the educators and leaders today to recognize that we cannot see everything in the numbers. Actually, yes. I might even add, the most important things are not visible in the numbers or Excels or GDP. Like how compassionate or how passionate our teachers are. We cannot see that in the GDP. How strong relationships we have in the country, we don't see that even. So a school or a parent or a leader who only looks at the numbers doesn't really know what they want. So I think we need to remember that.
Yes, and I definitely agree with you especially when you were saying the thing about like how we want to have people at shops or libraries and stuff, because it feels good also when you walk in or somebody remembers who you are. You're not going to have that with the machine. You're not going to have that connection. You're not, even if it's just like a little small talk about how your day was. If you have that with the machine, it's one-sided. Like,
yeah. And I think we have kind of seen a little bit of that already because of COVID, when everything became like we had to only use Teams and Zooms, and you know, we see that the lack of human touch, human connection, we can feel it very concretely. We can see it. So I don't want to have a future like that.
Yeah, definitely. And like you were saying with COVID, it's like we did see so many of the effects. Like people have been talking about like how horrible it was for their mental health and their physical health and like everything to just have it go to technology. That's why, especially during the beginning of COVID, I'm very lucky because my family, we live out in the suburbs and we have a backyard. So we were able to have people over in the backyard, very, very far away, and still have that connection. But I know so many people who were in an apartment in the city and had no access to having other people there. And it's just, I don't want to have us like be forced into a world like that because that's how we set it up, you know?
Yeah. No, I think one thing that sets us apart from machines, I mean, this could be another conversation. Like, I really believe that the machines and computers and AIs will actually outperform us in many ways. But one thing that I think will be left for us humans is that we can give meaning or purpose to things. We can tell stories or kind of color the background. Like, even though a machine could kind of perform as well as let's say they write a poem, they compose a symphony, they make an article, they write a book, they have done that already. They still kind of tell me why they did that. What was the value for humans? Like, why did they want to do that? What led them to do this? Like, they perform, they do stuff, but they don't have a story. And I think when people connect, it's all about, what led me here, what I'm feeling, what my day and week has been like. And like, I think in this sense, we can give meaning to things. And I think that will never be taken away from us.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So can you tell me a little bit about the process of writing about the future?
Yeah. So this is my first book, first of all. A lot of kind of, behind the scenes work already done for the team. What I do for a living, I give lectures and I speak in Finland and around the world. So I had kind of worked on these subjects quite a lot. And when I go to give a lecture, obviously at the end, there's a discussion. So I also get kind of insight what people think about this, how they react, what kind of questions are being, asked. So that kind of gave me the background, like, okay, I see that these topics interest people and get people thinking. So I want to write a book in order to reach not only those people who have the possibility to go to seminars and webinars, but rather also students, teachers, parents, like everybody. So I wrote the book, obviously in Finnish first, and now it's been translated in English. And I noticed that when you're doing your regular work, and in my case, I was traveling a lot before COVID, it was quite difficult to kind of concentrate in the book only. Like, it's possible to write here and there, but I noticed that the best time for me to write is in the summer. So I actually went to this island called Reunion, which is on the east side of Africa. It's between Mauritius and well, it's on the east side of Africa. Anyway, it's like this volcano island, a small island. I went there alone, and I spent like 4 weeks there writing, basically. So every other day I did a walk, like I went to hike in the mountains, and every other day I wrote. And that was a very good balance for me. I was able to kind of put it all on the paper, and then walk and think over it the next day. And then obviously when I got back, the book wasn't finished at that point. There was still a lot of work to do. But anyway, I kept working on it, and here we are. It's been translated in a couple of other languages as well. And I'm very excited to see how it's, what the reaction, what the response is in the US. because obviously there are a lot of stories, my personal stories, and also references to kind of the Finnish way of doing a Finnish lifestyle, and it's also a window to kind of this Northern European thinking, I guess.
Yeah, I was actually gonna bring that up because that's something that was really interesting because I'm in the US. And it was really interesting to read that because certain things I'd be like, wait, what? And then I'd go, oh, wait, no, that's part of this other culture that I don't know much about. And it was such, like you said, it was an interesting window into that.
Yeah, because I was like, when we talked with the editor from the US, and I was like, okay, so I need to take these examples out, and I need to like come up with something more relevant for the US readers over here. And she was like, oh, no, I think it's super interesting to see like and hear those like things from you. So I was like, well, I believe you then. let's
yeah. One of my favorite parts in the book was like throughout it, how like you see stuff that's more personal interspersed during this, because parts of it are like more of a critical analysis of like what's going on in this world and like what we can do in the future. And then, but every now and again, you'll have stories that it'll be like, well, I was doing this in this place, and this is what I learned. And I love that.
And you know, the context has to be there. Like stories really help with that. And I wanted to write it, like I kept young people in my mind when I was writing it, because I didn't want to create this book that is with all the difficult vocabulary and terms and you know, all the kind of, no, like I wanted to write a book that it would be very easy to read. And I've heard that the youngest reader has been 10 and the oldest has been 90 in Finland. So I think that was kind of, I knew that, okay, this is what I wanted to achieve. So it is really for everybody.
Yeah. And I'm 14. And so as I was reading, I was like, wow, it was so great. And it felt so accessible too, because so much of academia is not accessible. And it's like, okay, if you don't have a PhD, you can hardly read this. But this was, and it was very intelligent, and it didn't talk down, but it still was like I was still able to read it and enjoy it and understand what you were saying. And I love that. And as I was reading it too, I was thinking like, I've got friends that I would recommend this book to. Like I know people who I think would love this book. And I wouldn't have to worry, oh, is it not accessible for them? Because like you said, it's like the youngest person that read it was 10, but the oldest was 90. Like it's
that I know of. Like,
that you know of, but
yeah.
But yeah, I just thought that was really great in it.
Thank you.
Well, I only have one more question for you today, and that is, what do you have coming up?
What I have coming up? Well, now that hopefully the world is going back to normal, or at least closer to normal, I have more keynotes and gigs again. I'm actually going to Kazakhstan next week, and then I'm going to Austria the week after. So those are the first trips in a long time. So I'm very much looking forward to those. And maybe now that we're doing webinars, it's more possible for me to even do these gigs and podcasts, whatnot, in the US. So maybe one day I'm coming over there. Who knows? Again.
Come over here. Come to Chicago.
Yeah, I would love to. But anyway, like just a regular life, I think, for me. I talk about the future. I write about the future. I've written a second book, actually. Maybe that
come on the show if you want to talk about that again. You can come on again.
Yeah, well, it's about future identities. So how do we define ourselves among this change? Like if we kind of build ourselves or the image of ourselves upon the kind of title we get from work or the kind of ideal, you know, the job, then what are the things that we can kind of build ourselves on? So that's kind of
I would love to talk to you about that sometime, because the other day I was literally just sitting here thinking like what happens like when people tie their identities into their jobs, and like how can we stop? Okay, we need come back on when that one releases and we'll talk about that.
Well, that's actually it was one kind of section from the first book.
And well, that's what got me thinking about it too.
Oh, really? Because my editor was like, "Hey, this is a nice thought. Like, I think you could make a whole book out of this." And I'm let's do it then. That's how the second book was born.
It stuck with me. I want to talk to you about that at some point, because it's really interesting.
Yeah, no, but I think that's kind of necessary for us, at least, our generation, because we know that it's going to be more like a gig economy, and we're going to do many things simultaneously. So we kind of just think ourselves as one type of the job cannot be the first thing to mention when you talk about yourself, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
But anyway, that's a different discussion.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was so great to chat with you.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
All right. Well, for Read Between the Lines, my name is Molly Southgate.
And I'm Perttu Pölönen.
Let's end this the way all great stories end. Happily ever after. The end.
Thank you for listening to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. This episode is hosted by Molly Southgate. It is edited by Rob Southgate and produced by Southgate Media Group. You can get in touch with the show at readbetweenthelines@gmail.com, or you can send us a voicemail at 708-887-9473. That was 708-887-9473. You can also find us on Instagram at Read Between the Lines Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.